Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, New York. Thank you, all the people who are watching us on live stream. Wow, it really brings back a lot for me talking here in New York, one of my soul homes. So thank you so much for being here. It's beautiful to be with you, particularly on Earth Day. So it's great to see all of you. I'm going to have a lot to say today. I think we all come with a lot of feelings to Earth Day this year. So let's all settle in, move into the deepest places within ourselves, and know that save our planet, we have to go very high. And in order to go very high, we have to first go very deep. So I welcome you into this space, those of you who are here, those of you who are on live stream. And to begin today, I want to introduce you to a man who I think at this point we all know. Someone who has become a friend, certainly a colleague, someone who has really to say that Steven Donziger has been in the belly of the beast, is putting it mildly. He knows on the most visceral levels what's really going on here. He is so articulate about what's going on. He continues to inform us and continues to inspire us. So I'm so grateful, and please join with me in giving a big, big welcome to Steven Donziger.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Can people hear me okay? Okay. I am so happy to be here. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for Marianne for letting me be a part of this amazing movement. This is a movement, okay? This is not a campaign. It is a movement. And you know, I've done a lot of environmental justice work. I'm a lawyer, worked a bunch of years on this case in Ecuador. And one thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of people, obviously, who care about the survival of this planet. It is spreading and the movement is growing. And what is lacking, in my opinion, in this country are people at the highest levels of our government who get what's happening down here, okay? Who are capable of responding to what we are demanding happen so our planet can be healthy, so our children and grandchildren can live in beautiful ways in this world and not have to worry and not have to have the stress of wondering if our Earth is gonna collapse. And I wanna say about Marianne, oh, there you are. Where'd you go? Marianne, I believe, is the person now in this country who has the capability and the courage and the tenacity and the integrity and the kindness and the toughness to make it happen so we can deal with this fundamental crisis in our society. So thank you. You're such an inspiration. And you were that way before I even met you. But I want to tell you just a little bit about how we met, because I think it's a testament to what I'm talking about. Come on up here. Some of you might know that I recently emerged from 3 years of detention. In a nutshell, I represented and still represent indigenous groups and farmer communities in the Amazon of Ecuador. The people I represent know firsthand what Marianne is talking about, what you know through your own experience, what you feel viscerally about what's happening to the planet. And It's been an honor, really, as a lawyer, to represent them for so many years. It was never, people say, oh, I can't believe you did that, it's so great. No, I enjoyed every minute of it. I still enjoy every minute of it. I still enjoy every minute of it, even though I just came out of almost 3 years of detention. And, you know, the lesson that I draw from that, or one of the lessons, is when you fight hard enough, when you get close to these entrenched pools of power that are trying to keep people down, that are trying to exploit the earth even more, so it's just screaming out in horror. It's all these weather events, or the earth crying and screaming. They're desperate pleas for us to live again in harmony with nature and save the earth and understand our humble role in the larger scheme of things in this natural world. What Marianne is facing in this campaign, in my opinion, is and will be an effort by these entrenched pools of power to try to ignore her, marginalize her, try to make her irrelevant, try to make her not credible. But we know the truth about her, and I can tell you it is up to us, every one of us in this room and out there in the world, to spread the word and fight for the space in this country, I mean the political space, in this democracy, or what is left of this democracy, so that the truth can be heard, so that leaders, courageous leaders like Marianne, can do their work, can be reported on, can be covered by the media, cannot be subject to reprisals. Okay? That's up to us. We need to protect her, so there's space out there so she can campaign in a way that she can be heard and get elected president of this country. When you fight for the underdog, you are going to get resistance. You want resistance. It means they're feeling it. It means they're paying attention. I have never met an attack on me that I didn't see as an opportunity. I'm just telling you that. Okay? And I know Marianne feels the same way. I was stuck in my home with an ankle bracelet. By the way, my wife is here, Laura Miller. Thank you, I love you. So we were stuck in this just bizarre Orwellian, Kafkaesque situation with an ankle bracelet, and we have a 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side. We lived there with our son, who's now a junior in high school. COVID came down, we couldn't leave the apartment. Of course, many people didn't leave, but we couldn't leave by order of the court, or I couldn't. And I started to get on social media. Some of you might follow me on social media. If you do, thank you so much. You really saved me. I'm just telling you the story. So I got arrested on this unfounded contempt of court charge, which I believe is completely bogus, in a case prosecuted directly by a Chevron lawyer in the name of the U.S. government. By the way, I'm the only person in our history prosecuted privately by a corporation. I started to get on Twitter and Instagram, and little by little, I sort of learned how to connect with people online and met so many people and got so much support online. And when you're sitting in your home, you know, like in a prison in your home, to be able to connect with literally hundreds, thousands of people around the world was so important. It just lifted us up. The solidarity was just incredible. I mean, they want us not to have solidarity with each other. They wanted you to not know what was going on with me, okay? You wouldn't let that happen. You made the world know what was going on with me. And, you know, I met Marianne on Twitter. By the way, I'm still learning Twitter. I'm not a digital native, I'm an old guy. But let me just say this. I noticed she retweeted one of my tweets. And I looked her up, I'm like, oh my God, she has like 3 million Twitter followers. I had like 3,000. Like, that is really cool. And I DM'd her, and we connected. And when my trial, my criminal...
I'm sorry, but the Democratic Party is not democratic. They're never going to let Marianne run. Kennedy is running, and he's not even going to get past the DNC alive.
Okay.
You're wasting our time. You're wasting our money.
Can we, honey?
What you're talking about.
In any event, I come back. All good, we're good. Okay, now, I was about to begin a criminal trial right here in Manhattan for contempt of court, because I wouldn't give my computer to Chevron with all my confidential case file. And I asked Marianne if she would come to the trial. We were planning a little protest, maybe some of you were there. This was actually May 10th of 2021. And without even having met me, she came. And that kind of operates on a couple of levels we need to understand if we're going to have political success. I mean, one is it made me feel really good and a lot safer than I would have felt otherwise, which is really important. Two is it changed the dynamic, because when she walked into court, given her fame, I don't know, words are crazy where I don't like it, but I can't think of a better one. But given how many people knew who she was, it changed the dynamic with the judge in a way that favored me. Like, the judge had to be more careful because people, she knew, the judge who was like carrying out this, what I would consider a persecution of me, knew that people were watching, and they knew she had reach and she had power and she spoke truth to power, and the judge knew she had something to contend with other than me and my lawyers in that courtroom. So I thank you for that. And I want to say this, because this sort of relates to what happened to me and what I think we're all facing. We need to understand on Earth Day. By the way, this is the 53rd Earth Day. I don't know if you young people know that. 53rd Earth Day. Just as an aside, what that means is that 1970, when Earth Day started, like, there were millions and millions of people who gave a damn about our climate back then. People felt we were living in crisis in 1970. It's now 2023. Okay? It's 53 years have passed. And really, where are we? And I would argue that in a small way what happened to me, by the way, it's happened, the specific thing, the private prosecution hasn't happened to anybody, but the attacks on people who speak the truth have happened to so many people, right? And I would argue that we must draw an intimate connection between the survival of our democracy and being able to address the climate crisis. We gotta connect dots here, folks. Okay, we gotta connect dots. Look around the world just in the last month. The stuff happening in this country, the violence, the gun shootings, the train derailment, the poison mushroom cloud in Ohio, the abortion craziness out of the courts. A man gets eaten alive by bed bugs in a jail in Atlanta. 42 people in Georgia charged with domestic terrorism, mostly peaceful protesters. Laws being proposed and passed in many states to make people who protest oil installations, that is the installations that are destroying our world, turn them into terrorists and charge them with terrorism where they face draconian sentences in prison. It's not an accident. As we grow stronger, and we are growing stronger, they are coming up with new and more vicious tools to keep us down. This is not a bunch of crazy things happening, folks. This is the plan. Okay, it's the plan to keep this movement from succeeding. So I would say that as we fight for justice on this Earth Day, as we support our indigenous brothers and sisters who are the frontline defenders of this earth, this planet, okay? And by the way, don't never forget that, just as a little aside. I mean, I live in New York. I've been to the Amazon over 250 times, okay? But I'm still like a relatively privileged white guy from New York. And like what has happened in my social conditioning in this country and in my formal education is like the connectedness to the natural world was beating the hell out of me, if I even ever had it. Like I never thought of even trying to understand how the natural world worked. And in the course of being in Ecuador for so many times and having contact with indigenous leaders who understand the natural world, it finally dawned on me that the solutions are going to come from the people with the thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about how the world works. They're not going to come from us. I'm sorry. Policy solutions, yes, we need those. And Marianne is going to talk about that. But the understanding of where we fit in and how we really have to connect to the natural world and understand our humble place in this world is so critically important. And just understand, understand that whatever we're being exposed to with our media ecosystem, with our formal education, it's not emphasized, and it's really hard to get that knowledge. I'm telling you, it's out there, and we have to find it, and we have to sort of develop a new ethos where we live by it. So I want to salute our indigenous brothers and sisters who are the frontline defenders of the earth. And I want to say in closing that as we fight to protect our right to vote, did you think you'd be talking about fighting to protect the right to vote the way we have to now, after all the struggle and sacrifice people put down to get the right to vote in this country? We're talking about it again. The right to vote, piece of our democracy, not the whole thing, it's a piece of it. Elections, a piece of our democracy, free and fair elections, including access to information, including media coverage of all the candidates, not just those who work in the two-party system, the two-party corporatocracy. We need to fight for those rights. You cannot assume when you run for office in this country, it's a level playing field. It's not. You can't assume when you sue Chevron, you're just going to get a trial. They're not going to give you a trial. You got to fight for a trial. And once you get a trial, you can't assume they're going to give you a fair trial. You got to fight for a fair trial, or even like a slightly unfair trial that wouldn't be blatantly unfair, where you can win. So I just want to say that this great woman who I admire so much, who has so many of the qualities we need in our leadership, right? And who on a personal level has shown me so much as a friend, we need to not only support Marianne as voters, we need to protect the space in which she needs to operate to have success. That's our job, okay? So on this Earth Day, let's thank the gods who gave us the beautiful natural world. Let's thank each other for turning out. Thank you for turning out. Look at this crowd. It's amazing. And let's just remember we are all connected. We are all part of something special, and we are in this together. We're in it for Marianne. We're in it for the long haul to make sure the climate issue gets addressed. We're in it because we care about the future, and we're in it because we care about justice. And I want to turn it over now to a great woman, Marianne Williamson. Get up here.
Thank you. Steven Donziger, friend to us all. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Steven Donziger for your presence here today, for your wise words. Appreciate your generosity. I appreciate all of you who are here, and of course those of you on live stream as well. I remember the first Earth Day. I was a teenager. It was a kind of Birkenstock type of thing, lots of rainbows and balloons and rah-rah, and we were all excited about the Earth. And when Steven talked about the 53 years that has passed by since then, it makes me very sad. Because, you know, one of the things we've talked about a lot, I've talked about this in terms of the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. You know, every time another year passes and someone that you love has died, the grief gets a little easier every year. But I've always felt with the deaths of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, every year it gets worse. And every year it gets worse because everything we feared would happen has happened. And so every year that passes with Earth Day, instead of feeling like, wow, things are getting better, there's a realm in which it's getting better in terms of the awakening of people, such as everyone here by definition, to what the issues are and what we have to do to save this world. But it's also getting worse in terms of the viciousness of the system which institutionally resists our saving the planet. And as it institutionally gets worse, what I'm most concerned about is what it's doing to us emotionally and psychologically. People are starting to go numb. People are carrying so much anger. People are carrying so much fear. People are carrying so much anxiety. You know, everywhere I go, and I've seen this all over the country, which has really said something to me. Everywhere I go, I will say, as part of my talking, I'll say, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, and please keep your hand up, I'll say, so that everyone can see it. If you are a young person who has said, or I'll say, if you have heard a young person say these words, under normal circumstances, I would be thinking of having a child. But given the state of the planet and the state of the environment, I don't think it would be a responsible thing to do. That makes me want to cry. And everywhere I have gone in this country, I have seen exactly what happened just now. In a room like this, you're not surprised by the hands that go up. But in many of the rooms that I've been in, people are surprised. It's like, oh, well, I've heard that, or I've said that, but I didn't know so many people said that. And then I will always follow that up by pointing out, this is not normal. This is a species that is shutting down. This is not normal. The frogs have been in the boiling water so long, and now what's happening? You know, Steven and I were talking last night. And I was saying, he was talking about some of his friends in the environmental movement and some of the major environmental organizations. He said, well, you know, they're going with Biden. I said, wait, how is somebody in a major environmental organization going with the man who has given more oil drilling permits than Trump did, just approved the Willow project, and then now is approving the exportation of the LNG? How is this possible? And Steven said, well, they say to me, what else have we got? Hello! Now, I understand why major corporate mainstream media seeks to invisibilize me. I understand why Reuters didn't mention me yesterday in who was running. I understand why corporate forces invisibilize me. But this is people who theoretically are like trying to save the world in time. And so I realize what's happening is that the subliminal messages are getting in. The subliminal messages of, oh, that's a long shot. The subliminal messages of, that's fringe. And it's more important, and it's more significant, it's more dangerous than just invisibilizing a candidate. It's, if there's an environmental lawyer who actually tries to stand up to this, we will prosecute him, we will put him in jail, we will get the Supreme Court of the United States to support us in allowing Chevron to take over a courtroom in the United States of America to prosecute this man in order not just to ruin your life, Stephen, but in order to freeze the environmental activism of serious environmental activists and serious environmental lawyers. And by the way, it wasn't just me. You're leaving out Susan Sarandon was in the courtroom. Right. I mean, hello. So it's not just what they're doing on the level of transaction. It's what they're doing on the level of all these mind games. And now, not just invisibilizing candidates, not just threatening and going far towards negatively impacting the life of the people like Steven Donziger. Let's not forget what happened to Tortuguita, the environmental activist who was shot 57 times at Cop City in Atlanta. Now, there are political operatives who say, don't bring up negative things. Don't bring up negative things because it brings people down. I'm going to tell you something. As a candidate for the presidency, and if you make me your president, I'm going to be honest with you. And if there's some tough things for us to look at, we are going to look at those tough things. We will not be... Wait, what's happening there? Somebody... Peter, are you on top of this? You know, guys, many of... Are you okay, Vincent? Thank you. Thank you. Big guy going out there handling things. We have to face some things. If we look at the data, we all know what the data is. We all know that the glaciers are melting so quickly, it's actually affecting the curvature of the Earth. We all know that we are not on track to in any way reduce the carbon emissions in the way they need to be reduced. We know that we have now seen a president okay the Willow Project. We know that the Willow Project and the exportation of LNG will completely nullify all the wonderful things that they're bragging about in terms of green energy investment. We know that we've got one party that simply does not care, and we've got another party who's figured out what to say so that you think they do. And it is important that we make a distinction between the Democratic Party and the Democratic establishment elite, to whose behavior I just referred. But it's important that we remember that the people of the United States agree with us. In poll after poll, it is shown the American people, and I have seen this in my own life, in my own career, even politically, the American people are not the problem. The American people are decent. The American people are dignified. I'm not saying we're better than other people, because we're not. But neither are we any worse than other people. But I will tell you this, when we get together individually, we are real, we are authentic. When in our personal relationships, we get down and we get real. But in our public conversations, including our political ones, we have been trained by the system to be sophomoric, to keep it shallow, to just talk slogans, to not get real. And this is because it serves the system that wants to keep all power to itself. It turns us into spectators. And people that you would think would know better would say the stupidest things like we have no other option. Because we've all been trained to kind of spiral down. Somebody was saying to me on an interview just yesterday, he was saying, I've begun to think that there's really nothing we can do. He wasn't just talking about the environment. He was talking about racial justice. He was talking about criminal justice. He was talking about economic justice. He was talking about environmental justice. He said, I've started to think there's just nothing that we can do. And I pointed out, they want you to think that. And it's very important for all of us to remember, just like Stephen was talking about the intersectionality of all this, this is not at heart just a climate crisis. It is a capitalism crisis. Right? I actually do not even say that as an anti-capitalist. Capitalism isn't a light switch you turn off or on. So I'm not, the free market, there's a righteous profit in this world. That's a good thing. But Adam Smith, who himself was the primary architect of free market capitalism, said it cannot exist outside an ethical context. And what is happening now is a soulless capitalism. And that is what makes it a sociopathic mindset. A sociopath has no remorse. A sociopath has no conscience. And so when you have oil companies that know, it's not that they don't know. We now know that they know, and we know that they've known for decades. You do that, and children will have higher rates of asthma. You do that, and people have higher rates of cancer. You do that, and you are poisoning people's food. You do that, and you are poisoning people's air. You do that, and you are poisoning people's water. And that system does not care. Now, what I want to talk to you about is where we go with that. Because you're in a room filled with like-minded people, so we can applaud, but we leave here and you really take in what that means. Because these systems that do not care, and which have proven not just in relation to fossil fuel extraction, have proven in relation to insurance companies, and proven in relation to pharmaceutical companies, and big food companies, and big agricultural companies, and big chemical companies, as well as big oil, and as well as defense contractors. It has been proven now, none of us are naive, there is a system. It is an entitled matrix of corporate power that at this point has proven it would rather you drop dead than in any way impact their profit margin. That is a problem on our hands. So, where do we go with that? Now, some people are feeling very angry, understandably. Some people are feeling very fearful, understandably. Some people are feeling very depressed about the whole thing, understandably. But this is where we must hold each other up. We cannot take this struggle on from only a place of anger. Anger as motivation for political activism is like white sugar. It'll give you adrenaline, but then you'll crash. This is a marathon. We need an entire season of repair in this country. We need to cut the cord with an aberrational chapter of American history. It has been going on for 50 years. And it has caused a $50 trillion transfer of wealth into the hands of 1% of Americans. It has made people not only depressed, it has made people not only lacking in opportunity for health care, lacking in opportunity for education, lacking in opportunity of any kind to actually soar and spread their wings and have the lives they want. But it has actually, at this point, put so many people into an economic position where they're so busy just trying to survive, they couldn't be part of this movement even if they wanted to. And let's get real about the fact that many of the people I just described are the ones living in the neighborhoods. Now called, how malevolent is this? They are called sacrifice zones. You might have heard me on the debate stage in Detroit during the last election when we were talking about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. I said I lived in Grosse Pointe. I assure you, what happened in Flint would not have happened in Grosse Pointe. Why is it that what happened in Flint or what happens in Jackson, Mississippi, what happens in some of these neighborhoods where it's people who have no political power because they have no financial power, and they live in these sacrifice zones where these forces say, oh, put the petrochemical factories there, put the industrial factories there because those people can't fight back. And so what's happening, I believe, is that a new coalition of conscience is emerging in this country. On the left and on the right, there are people who realize something has gone too far. whether it's profits for gun manufacturers or profits for big oil, whether it's profit for defense manufacturers. By the way, when the president brags about all this investment in green energy, let's not forget, it's not just Yale. Really, sir? Well, then why did you give more permits than Trump? Really, then why did you approve of the Willow Project and the LNG? Let's not forget that huge, gargantuan, ever-growing defense budget. The U.S. defense industry is the single largest emitter, institutional emitter of greenhouse gases. But as Steven has seen in his own life, and all of us have seen enough, if you're even here today, you get what's happening. We can't just fight the fight. We can't just fight the fight on a transactional level. If this is only a transactional struggle, it's already over. And that's what people are starting to feel. But when you look at the works of Gandhi, and you look at the works of Dr. King, you know, Gandhi articulated the principles of political nonviolence. And he said that there is an inner light within every man, woman, and child. And that inner light within every man, woman, and child is a space out of which grows a power more powerful than any power in this world. And then Dr. King went to India. He studied the principles of nonviolence. He brought them back to the United States for application to the civil rights movement in the United States in the 1960s. So I want to remind you all, we've had big problems in this country before. We have faced forces which were invested usually for their own economic purposes, often simply for their ideological purposes, in keeping people down. But our ancestors rose up, responded to them, repudiated them, resisted them, and prevailed victorious. We answered slavery with abolition. We answered the institutionalized suppression of women with the women's suffragist movement, the passage of the 19th Amendment. We answered the overreaching of capital based on the Gilded Age, as Harvey K. will never let me forget, with the labor movement in the United States. And we answered... And we answered segregation with the desegregation brought about by the civil rights movement. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, it's simply our turn. What we are dealing with... And what we are dealing with today is just the latest iteration of the struggle that has been with us from the beginning. There were 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence who risked their lives to establish the founding of a nation built on the principles that all men are equal, built on the principle that God gave inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to everyone, based on the principle that governments are instituted to secure those rights, and based on the principle that if the government is not doing its job, it is the right of the people to alter that government. Now, that's where it began, but that's also where it got gnarly, because out of those 56 signers, 41 of them were slave owners. That is the American story. We're both and. We've always been both and. And every generation has lived out that struggle between those of us who really take seriously this idea that all of us should be able to spread our wings and soar. Wow, how incredible that is. No matter who you are, no matter what, your sex, your sexuality, your ethnicity, your religion, your lack of religion, no matter who you are, your culture, your beliefs, anybody. If you're not hurting anybody else, go be who you are and do what you want to do, which you cannot do if your food is poisoned and your water is poisoned and your air is poisoned and your earth is made uninhabitable. So what we've got in the United States today is a government that should be advocating for us. I'll tell you when they advocate for us: during campaign season. That's why President Biden said, oh, there will be no further drilling on federal lands. We all have to awaken from any naivete and see what's really going on in this country. As Steven has told us here, and as you say every day in your social media, your wonderful, wonderful postings. At this point, we have to recognize that we, like other generations before us, are not going to be welcomed into the halls of power when we say, this shit needs to change now. Rather, there is institutional resistance. But this is not a time for us to wimp out. Let us not be the first generation to wimp out on doing what it takes to get this country back on track. And I know that if your eyes are really open to what's going on, it can be traumatizing. But you know what? I think it must have been pretty traumatizing to walk across the bridge at Selma, and yet they walked. I know it makes us all very anxious, but I'll tell you something. It would have been pretty anxiety-producing for those women suffragists who were thrown in prison for doing nothing more than marching for women's suffrage. The conditions in the prison were so awful that they went on a hunger strike, and the men who represented the administration of the prison came into their cells, forced these metal contraptions onto their necks to force feed them. I think our ancestors knew something about anxiety and trauma too, but they continued and they persevered. I'll tell you something.